Hey everybody, this is a quick tutorial just to address those people who have sent me some emails and wondering what the best way to use the brushes I provided are. I use the term tutorial lightly. This is going to be a raw tutorial if anything. The phone may ring, people are going by, I live on a major street, there's liable to be interruption, so this is just going to be a quick one with some tips. I'm working on a set of tutorials for Justin at cartoonsmart.com. And I hope that you'll check those out when they're available. I'm not going to edit this one, so you'll hear me say and maybe backtrack a little as I do things. Natural part of the process, so you get to see it all. So very quickly, let me just give you an indication of how to use the brushes to add texture or to create texture, surface texture, okay? I'm not going to cover everything on the brush engine because that will be included in the tutorials that I'm doing for Justin. I'm afraid there might be a conflict of interest if I produce the same material for free on the site. So let's create a new file really quick. File new. 1024 by 1024 is good. Click on your brush, and I'm going to show you some very quick techniques. Excuse me. Go to your brush palette. Let's load one of the sets of brushes that we've got. You will have these in your brush folder, or maybe the name's already in the palette up there. Let's start out by looking at I don't know, I like Stone Troll. That's one of the sets. It's an ABR file. Oops, I should just replace these first. Replace brushes, that'll get rid of the other ones which might distract you. Oops. As I said, you get to see all my mistakes in their glory here. Here we go. This is the Stone Troll set. Let us pick a brush here, and let us quickly hit F5 and set a few options. Hit shape dynamics. I'm going to hit the size jitter. I'm going to hit the angle jitter, and let's see, the size jitter I've got set to pen pressure. Scattering, I'll do a little minimal scattering. I just don't want them all clumped up. And let's see, texture dual brush is okay. Color dynamics I will, and I'm gonna foreground background jitter at 100%. The dynamics, okay. So what I'm going to show you here is basically how to create texture with these. So it's going to be I'm not going to talk about all the settings for the brush. So I generally don't use a true black all the way. In fact, why don't we put a base color in here so you can see what we're doing. Let us get a we're going to do stone, so let's kind of throw some grayish, bluish stone in there. A little lighter. That's some light stone. There you go. So let's quickly flood fill that background. And then I'll lock that layer. That's my base color. I'm just going to put another layer on top and say this one is going to be a shade of that blue. I don't want to use black. True black is kind of rare in nature. Okay, and I'm not going to go into all the details why. We'll click the same one here, and I will just make this a slightly different one. Maybe really poke that a little bit closer towards the green. And let's go back to our brush. So we have our brush set here, right? Let me get my pen. I sure hope you have a pen. And my Wacom, and I'm going to put a few strokes on the page here. Now you can see already how with a well-defined brush that's well created from a photographic texture or whatever, you can create a nice brush. I'm taking a stroke here. There's a technique called stamping as well, which is useful, where I just click down to fill those areas, and that can be useful. I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. Okay, so we have our basic texture. Now how are we going to use that? Well, what you can do, one of the things you can do, of course, is using blend modes. You can get that to blend in with that other one, but right now I'm just going to show you really quickly your friend Bevel and Emboss, and you can see that something's already happening right there. Let's hit that down to Chisel Soft, and you can see that you already have a surface texture. In fact, you could set that at the beginning, so as you paint, you could see the texture in action. Let's bump up the depth a little bit. Hit that so it's facing down. We can go for outer bevel instead. Okay, so you can see some of the stuff that's happening there. pull back on the depth a little bit, maybe a little too much. So you want a little bit of a rough wall here, okay? Now, one of the things we want to change is the highlight mode. We want to pick a color. We want a tint of the existing color. We probably don't want white. It's rare to see that full bright white in a realistic setting. And the same thing here. We're going to get a shade of this color. Let's get that. Let's pull it down. We want the shadows where the light is being blocked to reflect the same color but just less of it. It's an easy way of understanding what's happening. So you can see how we've quickly gotten a little bit of texture on the surface. You can go a little crazy there and pump it up. You can come down here to the contours and try out a few different contours. Okay, this is turn off that global light. I'm not a big fan of that because it affects all the other settings. It may not always give you the results you expect, tying them together like that. So the best way to understand this is just to click it a few times. Can you see how it will create some interesting textures? It's actually kind of hard. You don't always know exactly what you're going to get. Now you have this here. You could flip it so it's facing up or down to get slightly different things. You could adjust the direction of the light. Okay, and what will happen is you'll get very different effects if the light's close, if it's out on the edge. Do you see how you can get instantly some quick effects? And not all of them will work. Like some of these, in fact, this is a little too bright still. You can even change this. For example, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I just want to give you a quick idea of some of the things you can do. Okay, so I changed that screen, but instead of screen, which lightens, let's hit one of the modes that darkens. Okay, that almost looks a little like a cartoon shady type thing. Let's hit multiply. Pump that up a little bit. Okay, so you can see that my point, hopefully, that you can get a lot of different effects just by manipulating bevel and emboss and by manipulating bevel and emboss in some of these gloss settings. Boy, it's hard to get some of those words out. So that's kind of a marbly effect there. Where am I going to leave it? Now I started clicking it. I've lost my place. Here we go. Okay, well, I don't like the way that went. So let's just get something a little softer. Let me see. I like a little sharper edge on that. Let's see. Down. No, what it is the light. I should have taken note of where the setting was when I liked it. Well, let me put this back then. Anyhow, I'm just going to go back to this. As promised, this is a rough tutorial. You're getting what you paid for, which is not much. So let's pump this back a little bit. Pull this back down. Okay, that's what I want, is a kind of a plastery wall to give you an idea. Okay, some of the other things you may find useful here. And remember, this is not making them seamless. You still have to work on that, and there's some other techniques to get there as well. Pick another one that's a shade of the color you want. Pull it down towards black. You can pump up the opacity, and what you want to do is, if you want the shadow to be closer to the edges, you'll just adjust the distance here until you get something that kind of works. Okay, turn off that global lighting, and here again you can monkey with this if you're so inclined. You can get dramatically different effects with just a few clicks. Okay, you see how that shadow is applied there. You can add some noise to it if you're inclined, and that'll also adjust the thing a little bit. We can also go into an inner shadow. You can change shadow colors. So say you're going here and you want to have a little bit of like an algae or green moldy type thing. You can pull some green in there, and you can pump up the distance if you want. That almost looks like a world from the top. If that water was a little more glossy. You can go as crazy as you want over here. Same thing applies here. Here again you have the gloss settings on this, so you can kind of go crazy on these and get various effects. Sometimes it won't be a big, and sometimes you get something that's really dramatic. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But there's other times where you come up with something surprising. So don't be afraid to experiment. I mean, you're not going to break anything by doing this, right? And you're definitely going to learn a lot by solving different problems. And if you're a better artist than I am, you're probably going to have a little notebook, or more clever than I am, and jot down how you got the certain effects, because sometimes I'll come up with something cool, and I've just worked like I do now, back and forth on intuition, and a few months later, you may not be able to get the exact same effect again. So if you have the option to record what you're doing, that's great. If not, just kind of jot down the key points so you can remember where you how you did it. There's other settings in here. You can go crazy, but you can see exactly what to do. And there, once again, is the famous contour element here, and you could just look at the total different look in those effects there. Just a few clicks can make a dramatic difference. So I am going to. That is actually looking more and more like a world texture, right? But I'm going to leave that like that for now. You can add a texture to the top. Now, the danger of using one of these textures, it's applied uniformly to the top here. And what will happen is that you'll knock out everything you've done up till now. Now, this may be okay if what you're doing is adding a parchment layer to a paper texture. But on something like this, like a wall, you don't want to blow the whole thing by using a repeating pattern that kind of gives it away. Of course, you can add new patterns or new textures to Photoshop. What we can do here is you can still use it, but what you want to do is probably reduce the depth until it's like light enough that there's a hint of something on it, but you don't want to blow out your work. Okay, now you can increase the scale or decrease the scale, and there are places where this does become useful. I've used it a few times. Again, that's a little bit outside of the scope of this this current tutorial here. For now, I'll turn it off. You do have other options here. The most useful as far as texture concerned are the pattern overlay and stroke overlay. For the same reasons, here's you have the pattern overlay. This other one is actually applying the texture to the bevel. Okay, so because the whole area is covered, you're seeing it pretty extensively. This pattern overlay, you can put it on here, and the good thing about this one is you can reduce the opacity, so you're just minimally affecting the layer, so you get a little bit of the detail. For instance, you see these areas are kind of smooth. You get a little bit of the detail in there. Actually, that's the bevel, so you're not going to actually see that on there. Aha, Burt. See you. We'll just quickly multiply. Anyhow, I think I'm getting carried away with that. I'll just turn it off, but you get the idea how that could add extra surface texture to that. If we jump out in here to the stroke, you'll see that it went pretty dark, but say you want to add I don't know, a light sand color to it. You see the dirt color coming in there. That's a little right there. Pick that, and what you're going to do is you could set it inside or outside. So somewhat different effects. You see the difference? More like a mud wall now all of a sudden. Center. So just experiment with that. That kind of blows everything out on that one. You could reduce or increase the size of it, so you could get a little bit of effect. The issue with textures is, for me, realism is layers of complexity. Okay, as you add layers of complexity, you can get dramatically realer and realer effects. Okay, more realistic effects. So, yeah. Okay, so let's leave that like that for now. So that is one way that you can add, use a brush and quickly add some texture. Now there are a lot of other ways to use a brush, and what I'm going to do now really quickly to demonstrate this next one is I'm going to merge this image. Okay, so now we have this on one layer. I'm going to add a new layer, and what we're going to do here is I would duplicate this layer. Oops, sorry. I will duplicate this layer, and I'm just going to save that, because once you're going to muck around with this layer, if you screw it up, you're not going to have it anymore. In fact, you could have saved the layered file. If you happen to like your texture, you probably don't want to flatten it without saving a copy of it, okay? In case it's something that took you a long time to do, you don't want to redo it. But here I am. Now I'm going to go to this layer here. Let's turn that off for a moment. Grab our bucket fill tool. Go up here and pick a pattern. Let's see what we got in here. Why do I not? I don't have all my I bet you I was monkeying around with this, so I'm gonna have to go find a nature pattern. Let's see, replace with nature pattern, and let me get a oh, I don't know, do we have something? Oh, that's pretty ugly. I mean, I know there's a quick tutorial, but there's a limit to my my tolerance and how much abuse I'm willing to afflict on you. Here's a rock pattern. How about that? Aha, here's something a little better. Okay, so we got a little rock here, and that's poorly done as well, but that's the one that came with Photoshop. So there you go. Let us turn back on our layer. Now, what can we do with this? Well, the reason I'm showing you this, that you realize that brushes can also be used in several other places in Photoshop. They can be used in the eraser tools, which is what we're going to do now. And they can also be used in the burn and the dodge tools, smoothing tools. So there's other places you can use brushes. But what I want to show you now is a technique I call cutting. I'm not sure if it has a better name. Let's go to F5. Let us pick our brush. Let's pick something a little different this time, just so you see. In fact, there's one over here that's pretty cool. Let's go back here and let me see if I can find it. Load brush, actually replace brushes. Let's do that right now. And let us go to Rusty Robot. I just love those names. Okay, so let us grab one of these here. Go back to F5. And if you click Shape Dynamics, it should go. Let's get that size jitter up here. Angle jitter. Brush tip shape. Let me see. Spacing. Let me kick the spacing up because I got a feeling that's going to be pretty solid if I leave it like that. Let's do a little scattering. It's way too much. Just want a little variation. Did I set the size jitter? Let me pump that size jitter up even more. Okay, and then you have a thing that's actually beyond the scope of this tutorial. I don't want to abuse Justin's cool nature there. So anyhow, I'm going to reduce the size of this. I'm going to cut into this, and the way I'm going to do that is just do a couple of strokes. But actually, before I do that, well, that's okay. Let me do it this way. You can actually set your effects. You can set your effects as you're painting, but just take a first whack at it like that. Go over here to your effects palette. Let's hit our friend Bevel and Emboss again and see what we got. Let's do the outer bevel. The danger of inner bevel, and you got to watch out with that, is that if you got a seamless tile, it throws a bevel over here on the edge, and you'll end up messing up the seamless tile. Okay, you may just make it seamless at the end and not have to do it, but if you're keeping your layers somewhat seamless, it makes it easier. But that's just a little extra info there. Let's go back to Chisel Soft. It gives a little bit more definition than the smooth. And let's mess with the settings a little bit here. You can see that I didn't erase all the way through. That's why we're getting a little bit of a bump there. The other thing I want to put in there is a little shadow. I'm going to pick again this color. What I'm going to do is push it down towards black. Quickly again, let me pump that up. Let me reduce the size of that. Okay, and let me see how contour looks on that. Oh, that's kind of okay, but we do have to kind of cut into that a little bit more. Let me see, inner shadow. On the edge, we can do something with that too. I'll show you in just a moment. Okay, so let's get this brush a little smaller, and we're gonna continue to stroke on this until we can see that texture. I want to expose that texture there a little bit. It's underneath. So, oh, you know what? I got this set at 50%, which is what's happening here. So always check your settings first. There you go. You can see that what I'm doing here is kind of exposing, and a few times I get to do what is called stamping. Like I said, you just stamp down. I'm just stamping. And we could also do what I said before about adjusting the profile, the gloss profile, because what's happening here is that's let's try to catch up. That's the only danger. You got a slow computer like this one here. Okay, so anyhow, and then let's go grab another brush here. Let me quickly get a wood brush that I have here. I'm going to load it right in the end. Load brushes. Let's see if that's an wood one. I think it is. There it goes. This one kind of looks like a bunch of cracks, so I'm just gonna it's kind of cool to work on the edges. So you just stamp down a little bit more. I even have to double stamp. Do you see how it's adding some cracks around where this thing is? Now, by all means, I'm not trying to create a finished texture here. What I'm trying to do is show you what some of the possibilities are. This is kind of distracting here. Okay, got that turned off. So anyhow, that will give you a little bit of an idea of some of the ways that you can use this. By my nature, I tend to pick at stuff incessantly, so I may pick on this just a second more, which you can watch. But that is a group of basic techniques that you can use. You see again, once again, with the color here, this is a little too bright. Now we're going to have to pull that up again because we do want to highlight, but what we don't want is that highlight to be white. Okay, do you see what's happening there? Now we're going to go down here. I'm going to pull a brown, but I'm going to pull it down. Pull it down. There you go. It's actually not enough reddish in it. There you go. Okay, so you got a little bit of an idea there, and what we can do there now is you would continue working on this. For instance, you would need a shadow in there. You really do need a shadow in there, and you don't always have to. You don't always have to use layer effects and filters to do these things too. So don't be afraid to paint with the brush as well. So let me just quickly set this. I'll leave that at normal. Grab a brush. Go into my brush palette. Let me just grab any old brush. Go down a little bit here. Create the size. F5 really quick just to avoid. How you doing? As you can see, that's one of my neighbors. Yep, just a moment. I'll be out, buddy. I can't talk right now. As I said, it's a rough tutorial here to give you an idea. So, that's one of my neighbors here, actually. And I think I gotta wrap this up because the kids will be home in just a second. So, let's see. I will pick a brown, and I gotta push it down almost to black. And what I'm gonna do is quickly. Scattering everything. Okay, it's okay. And what I'm going to show you really quick is with that brush, I'm just going to go paint along the bottom. Am I underneath that? Yeah, I am. Okay. No biggie. No. Okay. Filter blur. Gaussian blur. There you go. Hit the multiply maybe. Let's see, your multiply should do it. Anyhow, I'm getting a little carried away, but you get the idea. Okay, you see how these cracks look pretty real and everything else like that? And there's one more thing I'm going to show you. Okay, there's one more thing I'm going to show you here. Sorry for that pause. I thought this thing was paused and I was sitting here waiting for the light to turn back on. So there's one more technique I'm going to show you, and it's just going to be really quick and dirty here because I don't have a lot of time left. You have the layer, add a layer mask, okay? In that layer mask you can either make a copy of this. I'll show you that first. Select all, edit, copy, go to your channel. In the channel you can edit paste. The values of that color now are going to be used to create a mask. Did I paste that? No, I don't think I did. I'm sorry. Edit paste. Okay, well, now I look like a total fool here. Let's go back here, and what I did was copy the mask, a white mask. So let me just copy merge to make sure I got it. Go back to channels. There we go. Edit paste. And now you begin to see what we got here. I'm going to increase the contrast on that a little bit. You can increase the sharpness of the contrast if you need to, just to better define the edges, which is what I want to do. I am going to turn that off a second and see what I got. Okay, you really won't see this now, but what I want to show you is that now this is masked, okay? Certain areas are protected and certain areas are exposed. And what we're going to do really quick, let me see if I turn that off if you can see it. You can see that's what we got. So what that allows us to do is apply effects through the mask, okay? So if we want to chisel soft, and we can apply some effects through the mask. You see something happening to the surface there? If you want to apply shadows, Actually, let's try the inner shadow and see how that works for us now. We got the inner shadow. Get the color here, pull it down, turn off that darn global light. I really wish that wasn't on by default. Maybe there's a way to get rid of that. But do you see, we're making some adjustments here to this. You should be able to see some of what's happening to it by using that layer. Now this is very good for bringing out the cracks. If you had a layer full of little dots and you wanted to make pits in something, this was a technique that would be very effective to make a layer of pits that you could do. Cracks or stuff like that is also, this works good. If you want to isolate a crack that you've painted in grayscale, you put it back in the mask. It helps you isolate the cracks so that you could then apply a bevel and emboss effect to it. But I think that that's kind of the limit of this tutorial now. It's gone a little bit. I'm starting to ramble a bit, and hopefully this has given you an idea of what you can do and help you to put those brushes to good use. I hope that you will take a moment to write to me and let me know things you'd like to know about and how you like this tutorial and the brushes I'm providing. Okay?